Today's lesson is Chapter 10, Lesson 6, which can be found on pages 739 through 744. Our objective is I can multiply fractions. Question 1. The video shows two ways of multiplying fractions. The first is multiply first, then simplify, or you can simplify first, then blank. Question 2. When you simplify first, you need to find a common factor in both the numerator and the blank, then divide.
We're asked to multiply 5 6 times 2/3 and then simplify our answer. So let's just multiply these two numbers. So we have 5 over 6 times 2 over 3. Now when you're multiplying fractions, it's actually a pretty straightforward process. You just multiply the new numerator, the numerator of the product, is just the product of the two numerators, or your new top number is the product of the other two top numbers. So our the numerator in our product is just 5 times 2. So it's equal to 5 times 2 over 6 times 3 over 6 times 3, which is equal to 5 times 2 is 10 and 6 times 3 is 18. So it's equal to 10/18. And you could view this as either 2/3 of 5/6 or 5/6 of 2/3, depending on how you want to think about it. And this is a right answer. It is 10/18, but when you look at these two numbers, you might immediately see that they share some common factors. They're both divisible by 2. So if we wanted in lowest terms, we want to divide them both by 2. So divide 10 by 2, divide 18 by 2, and you get 10 divided by 2 is 5, 18 divided by 2 is 9. Now, you could have essentially done this step earlier on. You could have done it actually before we did the multiplication. You could have done it over here. You could have said, well, I have a 2 in the numerator and I have something divisible by 2 in the denominator, so let me divide the numerator by 2, and this becomes a 1. Let me divide the denominator by 2, and this becomes a 3. And then you have 5 times 1 is 5, and 3 times 3 is 9. So it's really the same thing we did right here. We just did it before we actually took the product. You could actually do it right here. So if you did it right over here, you'd say, well, look, these are eventually going to, 6 times 3 is eventually going to be the denominator. 5 times 2 is eventually going to be the numerator. So let's divide the numerator by 2. So this will become a 1. Let's divide the denominator by 2. This is divisible by 2, so that'll become a 3. And it'll become 5 times 1 is 5, and 3 times 3 is 9. So either way you do it, it'll work. If you do it this way, it kind of, you get to see the things factored out a little bit more, so it's usually easier to recognize what's divisible by what. Or you could do it at the end and put things in lowest terms.
Alright, and here's an example in our book on page 739. So as it says up here, multiplying fractions is really the same thing as multiplying a fraction by a whole number, which we already learned, because we turned that whole number into a fraction. So you multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators. So let's say we have, it says that there's 2/3 of a pizza's left, and remember that of is key that we're multiplying here. And they ate 3/4 of the leftover pizza. So how much of a whole pizza did Deandra eat? So we're doing 4/3 of 2/3, which is, 3/4 of 2/3, which is 3/4 times 2/3. So the first way is you can multiply first and simplify later. If we do that, we do 3 times 2, and then 4 times 3, and you just multiply across. 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 3 is 12, so 6/12. So these can be simplified by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 6, and we get 1/2. The other way is to simplify first. So we can look at this 3 times 2 over the 4 times 3 and know that I can cross out these 3's and change them into 1's. Because really, remember, that fraction line means that we're dividing, so really it's saying 3 over 3, which is the same as 1. And 2 over 4, we can simplify that to 1/2. So now we have 1 times 1 and 2 times 1, which is 1/2. So those are the two ways you can multiply fractions. And let's look back at these two questions and answer them in the form, please.